Welcome, everyone. We are so thrilled to have you here with us as we host Pam Abdy, who is joining us today as the president of MGM. One of our goals at Marlboro is always to bring in inspiring female leaders from a variety of professions to share their experience with us. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our two student hosts today, Clarissa and Jalen, who are two of our student filmmakers. Clarissa and Jalen, take it away.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, guys. So I'm Jalen. That's Clarissa. And basically, we're going to be interviewing Pam Abdy today. You're welcome to ask questions in the chat, but there will also be time at the end for you guys to ask questions.
Great. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so we're just going to start by reading Ms. Abdy's bio, and then we're just going to move into the questions. So Clarissa, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so as MGM's Motion Picture Group president, producer, and veteran film executive, Pamela has overseen development, production, and post-production for all MGM and Orion films. During her time at MGM, she's since greenlit movies such as Ridley Scott's Gucci with Jared Leto, Lady Gaga and Adam Driver, and Channing Tatum and Reed Carolyn's Dog. She's currently also developing a multitude of films such as Tommy Kai's Fiddler on the Roof, amongst many others. Most recently a partner and head of film at Make Ready. Abdy managed the creative team and all feature development, production, and post-production. During her time at Make Ready, the company financed and produced Queen and Slim and A Million Little Pieces. From 2013 until 2016, Abdy served as president of production at New Regency. During her post at the company, New Regency released the Academy Award-winning Birdman, David Fincher's Gone Girl, Darren, and then the Academy Award-winning The Big Short, and Justin Kurzel's Assassin's Creed.
All right, and Abdy also oversaw the release of Iñárritu's The Revenant in 2016, which received 12 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and also won 2 Golden Globe Awards. Abdy previously served as the executive vice president at Paramount Pictures, where she oversaw the development and production of a number of films, including Martin Scorsese's Shutter Island, Drillbit Taylor, which was produced by Judd Apatow, and the Golden Globe-winning award film Babel, and Mark Waters' Mean Girls. She started her career as an intern at Jersey Films while participating in Emerson College's internship program. She was initially hired as a receptionist and then went on to become Danny DeVito's assistant. And from there, she rose through the ranks and eventually became president and was able to produce many films such as Garden State, which won an Independent Spirit Award for Best Feature Film. She's also a member of the Producers Guild of America and serves as a member on the executive board of the executive branch of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences.
Thanks.
So, Ms. Abdy, if there isn't anything else you want to add about yourself or your experiences, we can just get right into the questions.
Sure. Yeah, those are, I've been doing it for 26, this is my 26th year, almost 27th year in the business. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes.
Wanted to start off by just kind of asking you some pretty basic questions of what a producer does, a production executive, and then follow that up with what does a typical workday look like for you?
Yep. Well, my day varies depending on sort of if I'm a producer or if I'm a studio executive. When I'm a producer, if I'm not shooting something, I go into my office, I have meetings with directors and writers and start trying to build and develop scripts and try to build out, getting those movies into production. When I'm shooting, it's a lot clearer because I know exactly what's happening every day. I wake up early, I go to set, I get there at call, I work on, I get through the day, I work with all the department heads and the director and making sure we're getting the work done and we're doing it on schedule and on time and problem solving. And I'm there until I'm one of the very last people to leave because we end up wrapping. And then a lot of times at the end of the day, you'll end up having meetings with the director or department heads to discuss, the ADs and to discuss the next day's work and any problems coming up or things that are coming up in the future. So, and I love shooting. It's truly my favorite thing in the world to do. If it were up to me, I would shoot every single day of the week. I think it is the greatest. But, I have balanced in my career going back and forth from being a producer and then becoming a studio executive. And the difference on the studio executive side is you develop and procure material and work with the filmmakers and get movies up into production, but I don't go to set every day. So I oversee the films more from my office. I go visit the sets. I show up if there's a big problem and I have to solve something, but I manage it more kind of globally. And everyone reports into me. So like if, for example, a producer has an issue, they call me and say, here's the issue. How do you want to solve this? If they have a financial problem, I have to help them manage that. So it's very similar, but it's also very different. And the thing is, when you're the studio executive, you're in control of the money. Whereas as a producer, you're going out and looking for the money. So, you don't have your own money to finance your movies. Whereas now I am in charge of, building out a slate of films and I have to plan ahead. So I have to build out films for, what our slate will look like for 2021, 2022, 2023 and beyond. And, this year has caused a lot of chaos because of the pandemic and no theaters being open. So it's been very different than say when I was, president of New Regency, where we didn't have that problem. We didn't have a problem of like, when are theaters going to open? When are they going to open to full capacity? And, that's a really a new challenge that has been added to my day-to-day conversations.
That sounds like that's a hectic schedule. I would need multiple naps, I think, to get
There's
through it.
no naps. And by the way, you would think it'd be simpler because we're home now and not driving anywhere. But right now, my days are very overwhelmingly crowded. I start this morning alone. I started at 6:15 with text messages because there was a problem, and I was texted saying, "Please call me as soon as you wake up," and which is never a good sign when you get a text like that. So I woke up and I've been dealing with an issue since 6:15 this morning. But we just go all day, and frankly, being home, working from home is even more difficult because there's been no boundaries now. At least before, when I was going to set or an office, I left work behind and drove home and had time to decompress, and then I could walk in my home and be mom and partner to my husband. Now it's just all on top of each other. So we're all doing the best we can, and I'm very blessed and I love my job, but it's hectic. Yes.
Well, thank you for making the time for us.
No, this is important. This is fun for me. This is fun.
Awesome. Okay, so I have two questions. I'll just ask the first one first. Taking it back a little bit, what was your high school experience like? And did you always know you wanted to pursue a career in the film industry?
Well, I went to two different high schools. I grew up in suburban New Jersey, and the first school I went to had a video program a video program. There wasn't film. It was called video arts or something. And we had these giant, huge camcorder type of cameras. But I didn't know I wanted to be in the film business. I actually was a dancer growing up. I started dance competitively I started when I was 3. And by the time I was about 9, I was dancing 6 days a week and competing all over the country and going into New York City and auditioning and doing theater. And, I was more on the performance side. And I didn't know anybody in the film business. So I had no access to even understanding as a young woman that I could have a job in this business. Because to me, you either had to look like Julia Roberts, or you had to be Steven Spielberg. I didn't know there was jobs in the business. I just thought, most directors were men, and I was never going to be a movie star. So that was not my thing. So anyway, it wasn't until I went to college and I broke my leg in dance class, which stopped my dancing for an entire semester. I went to Emerson College in Boston, and I went there for theater and for dance. I broke my leg. I was in a cast for many months, and I had to do physical rehab. And I kind of moseyed over to the film department at that point. And I started to read books, and I started to minor in film, and I had this great teacher named Dave Roderick, who was a documentary filmmaker, and he taught me film 1 and film 2. And he really taught me that film is like dance, right? And the camera is essentially the choreographer. And the way you design a set for dance and choreography is people moving through space. And it wasn't very different than using the camera to film a scene. So we would film things, and I had just started to fall in love with the idea of that relationship where I could, like, think about film as movement and dance. And Emerson had this great program. It's a wonderful school, and they had this wonderful program called the LA program, where when you were a senior, you came to Los Angeles and you did an internship your first semester, your second semester, and they helped you procure an internship. And that's when I came my second semester senior year, and I got an internship at Jersey Films, which was Danny DeVito's company and one of the best production companies in the mid 90s. I'm dating myself, but I already told you I've been in the business for 26 years almost. That's how I kind of, I actually did an internship first in Boston on this movie called The Next Karate Kid. I don't know if any of you guys have watched Cobra Kai or the original Karate Kids, but I worked on the fourth one with Hilary Swank as a PA and in the casting department. So that was my first job where I got to understand the set. And then my next thing was interning at Jersey. So sorry to like conflate all the time, but it's the easiest way to sort of explain it.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. That's really exciting too, because I actually applied to Emerson, so I like knew that program. Yeah, so it's super cool to hear someone who actually went through that.
I love it. It's a great school. I'm a huge promoter of it. It's a wonderful school.
Yeah, it sounds like a great environment. And then my next question is, hold on. Oh yeah, what kind of things did that internship at Jersey Films entail?
Well, I would get coffee, I would run errands, I would clean out the kitchen, I would do like whatever was sort of asked of me. And Danny had a female partner named Stacy Scher, who became a mentor to me. And she started to teach me about reading scripts and how to do coverage, which is how if some of you may or may not know, but coverage is basically you read a script and you write what the synopsis is, and then you give your opinion about, would you recommend this as a film to pursue or not? So I really learned in that first internship sort of how to identify good writing. And she took the time to teach me about good writing and sent me, the two first scripts she sent to me to read. One was Boogie Nights by Paul Thomas Anderson, and the other was Truman Show by Andrew Niccol. And Boogie Nights was like life-changing for me. And I'm so excited because now 26 years later, I just worked on Paul Thomas Anderson's new film, which will come out sometime later this year. And I just thought it was to me, it was life-changing, reading that writing and knowing that I have to be around directors and do this, it was so fun. So.
Yeah. So kind of going after that, we'd love to know what you look for when deciding to greenlight or produce a film, specifically when you're reading a script, like you said, and doing coverage. What things do you look for?
I look for the concept, and is the concept accessible to a bigger audience? And, how are we, sorry if my text messages come in, how are we, who are the characters? Do I respond to the characters? Is the writing good? A lot of it for me is about who the director is, because I have a very strong opinion about development. I don't believe that executives should sit in a room alone developing script after script after script without a director involved. I feel very strongly that a filmmaker, everything comes down to that filmmaker. Because, I joke sometimes as a producer, your best and worst day as a producer is your best day is the director's coming on board and your movie's going to get made. The worst day is a director's coming on board and your movie's going to get made, but it's not the movie that you've been living with for the last year or 10 years or whatever. And, filmmaking, it's different in television, but filmmaking is a director's, medium. They are the ones in control. And if you don't have a great filmmaker, you can run into a lot of trouble. And I've had that over my career where it was not necessarily the right director choice and the movie didn't actually come out. No one sets out to make a bad film, but it doesn't always work out. You don't always make great stuff. It's like, I've made plenty of bad movies that weren't in that bio, by the way. So, and I think you learn from the bad movies too. It's not, I don't regret any, I really don't regret any of them. It's just, so I really look for who's going to be the author of that story, like who's navigating the story. That's very, very important to me. And then, it changes when you're a producer and you're not responsible fiscally for, you're responsible to deliver the movie on budget as a producer, but when you're not responsible for building out an eclectic slate of movies that needs to perform and return on the investment in a way that, I have a lot of people that I answer to, right? I'm not I run it, I pick the movies, I'm part of the green lighting of the movies, but at the end of the day, if the movies don't work, then I'm going to be out of a job. And, but as a producer, I can sit in a room and dream and make a little movie that no one will maybe see, or maybe a few people will see. As a studio head, I actually have to be deliberate in my choice of films. I never lose my original intention, which is filmmaker first and going after stuff that I love and I think will work. But I do have to think, strategically in a way that I don't think as a producer you necessarily have the burden of.
Yeah, and that's really helpful information. And I think that what you said about how important the director can be, and a little bit more about the role of a producer. I think you touched a little bit on this, but would you want to elaborate on what qualities do you think a good producer has? And I think you talked about a little bit like what you look for in a script and how you see movies, but in terms of qualities and things.
Yeah, I think it's it's different roles you play, right? It depends on sort of that particular project. But for me, I can only speak from how I approach the job because it's the only way it's my experience, right? And everyone's experience is different and every producer is different. Not every producer shows up on set at call and leaves at wrap, but I feel obligated that's my role. I also feel like over the years, in the beginning when I was starting out, I would get, it's a lot of pressure and stress sometimes, and I maybe necessarily didn't handle every situation with calm or strategy approach. And I feel like as I get older and more experienced and my skills grow, I can approach things more holistically and calmly. And it's really just a series of problem solving as a producer a lot of the time. And the other part of it is depending on how closely you work with the filmmaker. A lot of the filmmakers I work with, I'll watch on the monitor the scene and I'll track the script while I'm on set, because a lot of times what happens when you finally get to shooting, people stop reading the script. So you start to lose the narrative of the movie, right? And you don't ever, other than The Revenant, which I worked on, shoot in order of the script. You may shoot one of the most emotional scenes of the entire story on like day 8, and you haven't even, the actors haven't even gone through the journey of the movie yet. So you have to really be mindful of the thread and the narrative and the performance, and just sort of, as a producer, I like to watch that stuff from the background. And if I don't feel like the director has it or the actor's giving the right performance, I very quietly will take the director aside and say, hey, maybe you want to do that one more time? And what about this? And, especially if it's like a comedy, like when I made Identity Thief, like we were always, it just, the process of that was, a lot of improv, and Melissa McCarthy and Jason Bateman like to improv a lot. So we would like track the story, but then we'd also have the freedom to play, and everybody would like throw out ideas, and I'd go up to Seth, the director, and be like, hey, try this or that. And it's just, every movie's different. You just have to sort of see what the rhythm of the set is, and like what the needs are. But, at the end of the day, the producing in its most simplest form is problem solving and planning and organizing and being like a mother to everyone. Because you have to, you're constantly, dealing with, everyone's own agendas, emotions. The prop department always needs more money, or the production designer or the costume designer, and you're constantly like dealing with that. And, it's just a lot of problem solving.
Yeah, I haven't thought about the producer position as sort of like having to keep that rhythm. I don't know why. And that's in a really interesting way of putting it. And also the idea that like people just stop reading the script at a point, like, I don't know, I can't imagine not doing that. So
I know. I mean, I learned that young from Stacy and Danny. Honestly, they were great teachers, and it was something I always learned from them because they never stopped reading the script. So I feel like it's really one of the things that a lot of people don't do, and they forget. Like, I have trouble when I'm shooting a film, like producing a film, to like even watch other movies, because at the time, because what happens to me is like I would go to the movie theater if I'm in the middle of shooting, and every time I'd watch a scene, I'd be like, why did they choose that shot? Why didn't they get this piece of coverage? Why aren't they telling the story this way? Because it's the other thing on set that I do a lot too, is make sure we have the coverage, because if you don't have proper coverage, you're messed up in editorial. You always want to have options so that you can, like, for pacing and getting out of a scene. And again, people get myopic in like their little departments and what they're doing. And someone has to try and stay like zoomed out for a while to keep track of all that stuff.
yeah, big picture. It's a big
Yeah.
job. Okay, this is sort of like a question that's shifting from what we've been talking about, but just what would you recommend a student interested in the industry do to like get a foot in the door? There's a lot of people at Marlboro who are like interested in going to the entertainment industry, so this will be good.
Listen, I think internships are a great way to get in there. I think if you can PA on stuff, again, I can only speak to my, people ask me that question all the time. I think there's a lot of different avenues to go down. Like, you can go through the agency way too. Like, I think, I never worked at an agency or like a management company, but a lot of people start out there. And what ends up happening is, even if they don't want to be agents or managers or any of those kinds of, more business jobs that are maybe less creative day to day, they help you meet talent and see how the business side works. And you just don't know where it's going to lead. So my advice always, especially to like kids coming out of, college, a lot of times is more where I've spoken to, especially at Emerson, I do a lot of stuff for Emerson. I always try to say to people, like, don't think that, like, don't put so much pressure on yourself to have the perfect internship or the perfect job or the perfect production company or the perfect thing. Like, you don't know what each thing leads to the other, right? Like, each job begets the next job. And on top of all the things I've told you about today, it's also a relationship business, right? You have to be kind, you have to be generous, you have to return everyone's phone calls, you have to not have arrogance, you have to, like, there's no job too small. I always say that. I still get up in the middle of a meeting and get coffee for somebody if they need it. Talent, like, it doesn't matter. You can't have an ego. At least on my side of the business, it's about having no ego. And I think that people put too much pressure on themselves that, like, I must have the perfect job for the first job, and then they maybe pass something up because they don't think on paper it feels like the perfect thing, but you just never know what's going to happen. Like I got very lucky being an intern at Jersey Films, which happened to be one of the hottest production companies in the 90s. But, you know, I have a lot of friends that I've grown up in the business with that didn't work at a Jersey Films, and they still have a great career. And, you know, again, it's a lot about how you foster relationships with people. Like every job I've had was because, not just because of my skill set, but I wasn't out so far, knock on wood for me, I wasn't out looking for a job. So, you know, other than when Jersey Films closed, I had worked there for 8.5 years. Then I went on to Paramount Pictures. I got hired at Paramount Pictures because I was newly available. And from that point on, all the other jobs were with my longtime partner, Brad, who we were at Paramount together. We went to Regency together, and we started Make Ready together. And my Scott Stuber, who runs Netflix, who was my partner for 5 years after Paramount in between, was the president of Universal when I was the president of Jersey Films. So I worked with him as a producer. So at the time when he was looking for a partner, he knew my skill set. And, you know, he came to me and said, do you want to be my partner and that's how that works. So again, it's like, you got to make relationships and nurture those relationships and, you know, become reliable for people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pursuing like an art thing as well. And it's like those relationships, I feel like they're always vital. It's that underlying social aspect that really matters.
Yeah.
And then another question, have you faced any obstacles as a female leader in the film industry?
I'm like, there's not enough time to talk about that. I will tell you this. I generally, for a long time, you know, after Stacy and I were there, you know, there's usually only one woman in the room, right? In a leadership position. It was, you know, I know it's fashionable now to hire women and to, you know, really help promote women and people of color. And, you know, that's everyone's talking about it now, right? But I've been doing it since, you know, I started. And again, I had a great mentor with Stacy. You know, I've also produced or as an executive for 7 female directors, 2 Black female directors. And, you know, I think it's really important that my job now at this point in my career is to help make space and promote the next generation, right? And to make change. And if I don't do it in my position that I have, my position of privilege now, then like who's going to do it, right? So at MGM, I will tell you, and then the chairman of our company, who's again a relationship, a friend who has been a friend who used to run New Line, he came to me, hired me to bring to MGM because I had produced movies for him, and we've been friends for 25 years. So the way we approach it, I will tell you, you need male allies as well, right? You've always needed male allies in the workspace to help create space for underrepresented voices in any aspect of the business. And Mike is that person. He treats me as a true partner. We make every decision together. We, you know, he promotes me to be, it's not just him talking to, you know, the chairman, he's the chairman, but talking to the CEOs and the board, he's inclusive. So I think I have never had that other than when I was at my production company in the 90s. I have never had that in the business. When I was at Paramount, it was very male heavy, very male dominated. There was a lot of bullying going on, and it's hard. It's really hard. And, you know, I tried to be, but I also have had privilege because I've had some really key women that have helped me in my life. Stacy being one of them, Sherry Lansing being another one who I worked for a year. And this woman, Allison Shermer, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, who was another mentor of mine, who was my boss at Paramount for a while and also an executive at Universal. So again, it was like I found those women who helped me feel confident that it was okay to be one of the only women in the room a lot of the time, because they were mostly the only women in the room. And it's different now. It's changing, right? And I have so much hope because your generation hopefully won't have to deal with, and frankly, my 8-year-old daughter hopefully never has to deal with any of this stuff and talk about being a woman or not being a woman. Like I just hope that it just becomes equal and balanced. And I definitely feel like there's more balance going on, and I also take, when I took the job at MGM, I was adamant that I be part of the green light. I was not going to not have green light position. And I do. So, with Mike and our green light committee. And, I will tell you, we redid Orion Pictures this year as well, which had the history of being this wonderful place for filmmakers in the years, and then it became like a horror label. And we just relaunched Orion Pictures. It is solely focused on underrepresented voices, stories directed by women, by stories told and authored about underrepresented stories by underrepresented voices, people of color, LGBTQ+, disabled, and Alana Mayo, longtime friend of mine, we hired, and she's president of production there. And our entire Greenlight committee for Orion is all women. And that's the first really of its kind. And that's the point. You have to try to make change because no one's going to change it. Like no one's going to change it for you. You have to do it yourself.
And then maybe this is just more of a curiosity of mine, but which fields do you typically see and like have patterns of being more male dominated than others? And which fields, have the farthest to go in terms of inclusivity?
I would say the crew for sure, below the line for sure, like cinematography. And, it's weird. Women have been more represented in hair and makeup and wardrobe. It just has been. I think the camera department, the grip department, the electrics department, directing, I feel like we're definitely moving into a new era with directing, which makes me so happy. Like you can now create a list of female directors that are excellent. That is like multiple deep. Whereas before, when I was starting out in the 90s, I think we were like, maybe Lily Finney-Zanuck will direct another movie, or Penny Marshall, or maybe Barbara Streisand will direct another movie. They're just, it just was not. Now I feel like that's definitely becoming more balanced, but there's so much work to do. And there's so much work to do on pay parity too. Like, it's just, I know when I got hired at Paramount and my male counterpart got hired at Paramount, he made more money than I did and I had more experience. And I ended up in my when I realized it, when I renegotiated, I was really tough and fair, not gross or a pig about it, but why should my male counterpart make a dollar more than I make when we're doing the exact same work?
Yeah, I think that's especially really interesting. For me, I am also a photography student, so being a DP or a cinematographer is kind of like the goal, and knowing that it's a typically more male dominated field that definitely serves as a motivating factor.
Yes.
It is really interesting to know. And then I think we had one more question, and we just kind of a good final thought of what you know now, everything, all the knowledge you've amassed. What advice would you offer up to your younger self?
Stop being so stressed out all the time and feeling like I was making mistakes or having the anxiety that I had. Like, be kinder to myself and have grace with myself. I was not kind to myself in my 20s. Did not have grace with myself. I felt like I was an imposter. Like my husband laughs all the time, who's in the background listening, but as my best partner and champion and supporter he is. I used to have this thing when I first met him. I used to say to him all the time, I have this thing. It's like the imposter syndrome. I'm like waiting for, everyone to realize that I'm horrible and I'm this and that. And he's like, what are you talking about? And, I wish that I hadn't spent all those years of wasted emotion and anxiety. And just honestly was nicer to myself.
That's a really good one. Well, thank you so much for answering our
Welcome.
questions.
Sure.
Yeah, we're gonna open it up to everyone else now. If you can put your questions in the chat, or you can, I guess, like raise your hand and we can call on you. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
If not, we have some pre-prepared ones too. So.
Everything is going on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll just go to those, and if anyone has anything they want to ask, they can, do what I put in the chat, whatever. All right, I'll just choose one. What guides your decision-making process?
A lot of time it's my gut and my instinct. When it comes to material, it's really what I feel in my heart. And I try to read something, like if I'm loving something, I try to not overthink it, and then just on a practical level, like how I operate within a space is through transparency. Like I always believe I present as is. Like I am who I am. We either can communicate with each other honestly or you can't, and I think sometimes you have to give really difficult bad news as a producer and a studio executive. And I always feel like, a fast no is better than a slow maybe. It's I think is the saying, right? My husband told me that saying once, and he's right. Because I feel like, I just feel like you have to be transparent, and a lot of people aren't because they don't like to give bad news. But I get bad news all the time. People tell me no all the time.
Yeah, Miss English, do you want to ask something? I see that you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I kind of piggybacking on that. Has there ever been a time where you really had to fight for a project that other people didn't see the merit of? And could you talk about, if so, like what did you do?
Sure. I'll use Garden State as an example. So I read. Thank you. I'm so happy that you're all still discovering Garden State. It's 17 years ago that we made that movie. I just said to Zach, I'm like, wow, we were at Sundance 17 years ago, which is wild to me. That movie I was president of Jersey Films. I read that movie and I grew up in New Jersey. So I'm partial because of the New Jersey connection, but I read it and I loved it. And then I read it again that same night. And I was like, I have to make this movie. And I met with Zach, and he was a first-time director, was going to act in it. And, he was on a TV show that had just been on for one season. He wasn't famous. It wasn't like it was George Clooney coming in to direct a movie after doing like multiple movies. So anyway, we went to every single place. We joked and we said we went to anybody who had a calendar and a pencil. We were in their office begging to make the movie, and every single person in town passed on the film. Every person. And we missed a whole cycle of a year because he had to go back to the show. So then we kept trying. And I remember one night I was at a screening and some agent from Creative Artists Agency came up to me and was like, hi, I represent Zach Braff, because at these agencies, like there's, sometimes they have teams of agents, right? And I didn't really know this person very well. And I was like, well, if you represent him, then get us money to make the movie. And, and I was like, call me when you do that. And we were literally like asking everyone we knew. We were almost like going to go like try and just do it ourselves. I was like never giving up. And frankly, he was like, you know what? He said, there's this guy, he's just breaking into the movie business and he's wealthy. He comes from Detroit. He's a mortgage guy. I'm like, okay. So we had a meeting with him And I had a budget, it was $4 million, the budget at the time. And we had a meeting together. He really wanted to do the movie. He was a big fan of Natalie Portman's. He loved the script. He said, okay, I'll do the movie, but we have to go find a partner. So you have to go find a studio. So now we went back again to all the people that passed on us and said, hey, we have half the budget. Will you give us half the budget? And we can go make the movie. And I remember coming out of one studio meeting and they offered us a horrible, horrible deal. They wouldn't guarantee any theatrical. It was just like a bad deal. And to Gary, who was our financier's credit, he looked at me and said, if you can cut the budget in half, I'll just pay for the whole thing and we'll see what happens. So Zach and I cut the budget from 4 million to 2.5. And we made the movie in New Jersey and by ourselves, no studio executives. It was like, if you go back and watch the behind the scenes on the DVD, it's really, really fun because we literally were like a bunch of kids making a movie we felt like we were a bunch of kids making a movie in our backyard. And, you know, between Natalie was just graduating Harvard and Zach's first movie and my first big movie as a capital P producer, it was just the greatest joy ever. Plus I got to make it literally in our backyard. And by the way, one of the ways I cut the budget was I moved home to my parents' house because there was no money for me to live in a hotel.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And we ended up going to Sundance, getting into Sundance. We sold the movie in a bidding war. We sold the soundtrack in a bidding war. And, you know, now I'm so excited because you guys are still watching the movie and liking it. So that's just a prime example of a no.
Well, I know for me, that's so amazing to hear about the origins because I've watched a lot of movies and I think that script has stood out to me the most. And the individual character development and the way that it was shot too. And knowing that it was such a project that was so near and dear to your heart and you were so involved with, it makes me so happy to hear. And I mean, yeah, I can guarantee you that people are still watching it and it has a lot of relevancy today too. So
that's great. I'm glad that you feel that way.
Yeah. And then if no one else has any questions, kind of adding on to that, I know that, you know, movie making and filmmaking today is a lot about staying relevant and keeping up with current trends and what's happening in the industry. What are some things that you do to stay on top of trends and, you know, make sure that what you're producing is current?
I watch a lot of stuff, you know, I watch everything and try to get ahead of, you know, the new emerging voices and just establishing relationships. You know, I always find that taking, you know, meetings, I take general meetings with directors and young actors and because you just don't know, like, you know, where they're going to be in 5 years and whether, you know, you may not have something to work on together, but establishing a relationship and really like following people's careers, I think is really important. And I also strongly believe in betting on, like, if you like a Zach, like I bet on Zach when no one knew him, or I bet on, you know, on Melina Matsoukas doing Queen and Slim. Like she came from TV and she was a superstar in her world, but she hadn't made a movie yet. And I love her. And, you know, I think to me, she's one of the most exciting voices making content and making films today. And I just made an overall deal with her at MGM and she and I are going to develop a bunch of stuff together and build her company. But I just strongly believe in investing in artists. That's the most important thing.
I love that. Okay. If no one else has a question, I have one I want to ask.
Sure.
A little, I guess, like kind of recalling the conversation earlier about like the sort of new trend of like people really wanting to rope in like women directors and like directors of color. Can you tell the difference between when people hire like diversity sort of for posterity versus genuinely wanting to like tell these stories?
I don't think it works. I think it's not about being like what everyone's saying you should be doing. I think you should hire people that you believe are going to deliver the best part of, you know, best piece of art or content or show. And I think that it's important to give give space and access to everyone on a studio level, right? You can't just marginalize voices. You know, a lot of things I got told over the years, especially coming out of like, oh, that movie won't work overseas because it has a female lead. Oh, that movie won't work, you know, internationally because it's about a very specific, you know, African American story. And I just don't believe any of that's true. I don't, especially now. Like the world is not, it's not like, you know, the world's global. Everybody's global. Everyone's online. Everyone has access to different cultures and art. And I just don't believe, I don't subscribe to it. So I think you have to go after the artists that you believe, as a producer, that you believe will tell the best stories. And I've done that my whole life. So I don't really look at it, you know, I see people, you know, but what are you really doing today? Like I look at the media companies, and frankly, it's put your money where your mouth is when you have the ability to do it, right? So when we were creating, you know, when everything, Orion came out of conversations, deep conversations we were having in the media level after the awful summer of George Floyd. And when I don't know, you know, every media company was sending, you know, content out or saying, we stand by our Black filmmakers and artists and people of color and women. Like there was all this, you know, it's really easy to post something online for a day and then just go about your life and not really look inside yourself and your privilege, you know, and what opportunities we're providing for artists, right? And we made a conscious effort to say, put your money where your mouth is. Pay people what they deserve. Bring more women and people of color into leadership positions. Give them the authority to spend money and bring a young filmmaker who necessarily would not get to make their movies on a studio level and had to go scrape together money to try to get their content made. That's how you make real change. And that's how you make, I think, movies and stories that otherwise have not been seen by a mass audience, you know?
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Thank you for having me. I'm so sorry for the constant text message and emails coming in. So I hope it wasn't too annoying.
No problem.
No, it was really wonderful. And I wish all of you luck. Yes, I love your future as female, Norman.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll keep in touch with all your teachers, and it sounds like you have a wonderful program, and you know, I can't wait to see the films you're going to send.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for all of your time and answering all of our questions. We appreciate it enormously.
I really appreciate it too. Thanks for giving me the time and the space to talk to you.